So, welcome to BITpodium episode 3. Maybe I should actually draw that as well now that I have my board. There we go. Easy as that. So, welcome everybody. This is your host, Daniel Billing, and as always, together with me, a fabulous crowd of people, starting from France as usual, I guess. Simone Moore, how are you?
Very well, thank you. It's bonsoir at this time of day here.
Yeah, then moving on, we have from Holland or the Netherlands, we have Dave along with us. How is life, Dave?
Life is very good here. Same time zone as Simone, so evening as well. So good evening to everyone.
BITpodium episode 3. So now I was just wondering, why do we have this echo from? I have my board. There we go. This is great. I actually have the streaming of my YouTube in the background, and it's not recording live, and I have it twice. Okay, learning by doing. So I should document this in my knowledge database for next time. Continuing, Earl, how's life over on the other side of the pool?
Oh, the other side's not too bad. We just got through with a nice Independence Day celebration in the U.S. and a good time held by all.
Wow, excellent. And you, Sean?
Wonderful, thanks.
You get to have another day off celebrating?
A little bit of virtual work for me as well. I like the chance to have the day when I'm not teaching gets me doing things on the keyboards again.
That's great to hear. So, on today's episode, we're thinking about dive into knowledge management. I mean, knowledge management, also, before I do that, I need to, now, still I get these strikings from Simone that I should start with the intro as we are supposed to start with the intro. So, for anyone that have missed up on the first 2 episodes, you can actually find those recordings on bitpodium.com. Or you go into our Google Plus site, and you can actually find them there as well. And you can actually follow us on Google Plus as well, and you will also receive any updates we do. And if there is anything you would like to send in, give feedback, have questions, or just give some praise, go into our homepage and share some love with us. And for today's topic, I would like to have a little deep dive into knowledge management. As you all know, knowledge management is quite a wide area to discuss. What I really like with knowledge management is it actually touches all the areas within the business. So independent if you're working in sales or in IT or whatever, you need to get your knowledge management in control or actually build a culture around it. So I will just throw out of nowhere, and I will then hope that one of you 4 guys will start off. What is knowledge management? No one dares. So, Simone, I will start off with you.
What is knowledge management? The silence is deafening, isn't it? Haven't we tried to resolve that definition our whole lives? What is being human? That's part of knowledge. So yes, knowledge management, huge. Wisdom, culture, life. How do we know how to even tie our shoelaces, to walk, to do things? Where do you start?
Well, I think that's good. I mean, you have put in wisdom there. You have put in culture. I think, and then learning. I think these are the main ingredients for a good knowledge management soup. Anyone else want to try out? Sean?
Oh, I was looking to see if there were any other takers. To me, the thing that kills me most about knowledge is how it's changed over time. Because now it seems to be almost less about what you know and more about what you can get your hands on. And not only that, but how quickly you can throw out the stuff that's no longer useful.
Hang on, is that just regurgitation, or is it actual practical application?
That's a hard one. To me, I think about exactly that these days, and I go back to there was an old example. I think it was, the allegory goes, it was something like Henry Ford, who sat and said, "I could be the smartest man in the room," because he had 5 phones and he knew which phone to pick up to ask which expert. And I find it super interesting today, especially my wife teaches K through 12, and the skill sets and core that they're teaching in the United States today is different than what it used to be. Because they're teaching them how to find knowledge. And I almost wonder which is more important, having the knowledge. It's the management part that's interesting, almost as much as the knowledge part today.
Yeah, I remember, even if I'm not that old, I remember sitting 15 years ago and just, rambling through a number of books to actually find information, which is today doesn't make sense.
Right.
And that information was, if it wasn't on an historical event, it was just outdated.
Hey,
anyway.
My mother did the best thing in the world. This is way before internet, but gosh, showing my age now. But she bought for us, saved, and bought for us the complete set of the Encyclopedia Britannica, the complete set. So we had this physical every time I did assignment and things. That's where we went.
Is that like the physical version of Wikipedia?
Oh, I've got bad echo there, Dave.
No, but yeah, at that time it was the only reference we had. We actually, when I went to high school or university, the only options that we had was to look up in books, or actually try to find someone, a professor or someone, to actually start interviewing. These were the only two options. So that meant that you need to do the investigation yourself. But as Sean mentioned, today it's not about doing the investigation. I think it's more about knowing where to find in terms of how to actually do the searching. And the other thing is actually to validate the data.
Hands up, how many of you have a bookshelf at home? Go on.
I'll confess my bookshelf has gotten much smaller than it used to be.
Yeah, my bookshelf has started becoming my iPod has started becoming a bookshelf.
I'm still hearing echo guy.
Yeah, we've got a really bad echo.
Maybe it's just knowledge amplified.
Daniel, can you say something? Because I think it's on your side.
Is it on my side?
You're the only one that you speak that doesn't have an echo.
So hopefully we can get rid of it somewhere. It could actually be me, because I'm the only one that actually have 2 sessions, because I have the BITpodium account open as well as I have my account for the for my own G Plus account as well.
Here we go. Incident management.
Trouble solving.
Who's got the knowledge article on it? Quick, someone do the internet search on G Plus Hangouts.
Do you still experience this lousy sound?
It looks like it may have dropped off. I'm not hearing the echo.
Oh, yes, there is.
A little bit.
Yeah.
But if you do the talking, I can mute. That's fine.
Did you know that knowledge is the only thing that if you divide it, that it multiplies?
I like that.
That's actually very cool wisdom there.
And the echo is gone.
I like that. Yeah, I think the secret is Daniel's muting as long as he's not got both of them open. But that's going down on my quotes.
Now, if he's actually muted, what does that do to knowledge? How do we mute knowledge? Do we want to mute knowledge?
Well, I
Oh,
mean, so a question comes up is, if we were talking about Encyclopedia Britannica, had we just accepted those things to be fact, uh,
Hmm.
for general reason, does knowledge become the interpretation of the person who experienced the event?
Well, not according to my teachers. Sometimes I got marked incorrect because I argued with what was in the encyclopedia.
Okay, but what if, again, if I happen to live in another country that maybe saw World War II differently, and did they write the history the way they wanted it to be seen versus the way that things actually occurred?
Ah, now there's a kicker for any service desk analyst. How is the customer telling you what they're experiencing versus what the analyst says as an IT person? And then when you escalate it, the programmer usually says, but the program can't do that. That's not the way I wrote it.
Yeah,
right.
exactly. Is what when is it that, oh well, I know what it was designed to do versus what it actually did?
Mm, scary
Well, and in
I,
stuff.
today's,
Yeah,
sorry.
I was thinking the same actually from when my daughter had her graduation from school, and actually, whenever there is classes in relations to religion, so even if I think now in the Nordics we are quite open-minded and not too tied down to any religion. Still, I mean, based on that you are probably born Christian, that you're raised Christian and baptized and all that, of course you have much more knowledge. And is that affecting your knowledge on the other religions as well, and how you actually teach?
Hmm.
I believe so. Yes. Culture. How many people have discovered that when they've moved somewhere else and moved away from their families, schools, even from different organizations, especially if you've been, um, culture inculcated into one specific way of working or being, when you move somewhere else, the most common thing I've heard from new employees when they've come on board is, oh, well, we didn't do it that way, we did it this way. And the response is there's two responses: either, well, this is the way we do it, or this is the way you will do it because it's the way we do it, or, oh, that's interesting. So how did you go about doing that? And then seeing if you can meld those ways and make something better.
Hmm. It's interesting to me, as you said. I think a lot of that's it's interpreted based on your perception and your background, right? And we
Mm,
tend to be sometimes predisposed to accept certain knowledge and not others.
mm,
And that almost becomes another part of, to me, like there's two pieces. There's the knowledge and then there's the management. The management side of things is your framework that you work with, and that is an interesting part of it. I think is science, and part of it's an art form of how quickly do I throw out old knowledge? How quickly am I willing to absorb new knowledge? Because some of those people are willing. The person who's too far on one side will take anything anyone tells them and says, well, let's run down the path this way. But someone else who's completely rejecting it, like you said, I work for this company, we always do it this way. So somewhere in there is that happy medium between I will buy it and apply it fast versus I'm not going to. I've been doing this way, and that's the way we'll continue to do this. And it's kind of an interesting balance.
I'd like to throw out then that to you guys to tell me what your experience is. I mean, knowledge is power is an old adage. I prefer knowledge is powerful. So, what's been your experience in how knowledge has been used either positively or lethal intent, if you like bargaining chips?
Yeah, I've seen knowledge used as an interesting bargaining chip in a couple of companies from the standpoint of I'm going to hoard the knowledge I have, therefore I become more valuable as an employee. And so therefore, I'm the only one who knows how to do this. You can't, if I decide to leave, then you're going to be hurt, da da da. So,
Hmm.
that's a very dangerous position to be in from a company's perspective, obviously, but also I think from an employee's perspective is, yeah, if you think you know everything or you think you have the market cornered, so to speak.
Oh.
When does somebody step up and prove you wrong? Again, you take Columbus deciding to go, no, the world's not flat, I can sail around the curve. Somebody's always going to challenge, and somebody may know something more. The old adage is you're not always the smartest person in the room. So somebody else is going to know more than you do at some point.
Otherwise, you're in the wrong room. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Agree completely with what both of you said. And Simone, I think the idea that it's powerful is a huge concept to take. It's a point, though, that it's when you leverage it. Because there is that element that if you hang on to that piece of knowledge and keep it hoarded too long, people will go right around you. You may be the only person, and we see this all the time in the IT world with outsourcing, right? We have this one thing and we only do it this way, and if you're in an organization, if you don't move fast enough with your knowledge and you don't distribute it quickly enough, what happens to that IT department in an organization?
There has to be flexibility.
Yeah.
Well, and Sean, I'll reverse that. What happens when the business doesn't share the knowledge with the IT department, and that they don't explain this is why we're doing what we're doing and how we do it that way, and the outcome we're trying to get to. So it creates an interesting dynamic that we don't get where we really need to go as an organization simply because people are saying no, they don't need to know that.
Right, and I've seen that before too, where we're working on one thing in one department and supporting servers and applications when we don't see the bigger vision is we're trying to pare down for some specific reason because we want to move faster, or there's another initiative that we don't know about but we're focusing on maintaining the old when meanwhile behind us somebody's busy going, well, we have to adapt to the new. So,
well, Daniel, you've got a presentation around there's cultural issues that are changing here as well. So, are we living this age of reason versus the dark ages that we had back in those times of, book burning versus no, save all the books, or, you just have to think about the library at Alexandria and everything that has gone. Are we rediscovering knowledge, or are we inventing new knowledge, or what's the cultural side of this?
I think one of the main differences is how easy accessible it is. I mean, information becomes so obsolete so quick. So even if, as Sean and Earl was in, I mean, if you're starting to hoarding, it's like buying grapefruits or bananas. They will turn brown really quickly. And which means that what is your actual value with that knowledge? It's actually the attention for the knowledge that is interesting. So shouldn't you measure the attention you have for your knowledge more than actually the information as such? And that's one thing that I have discovered with knowledge management, that it's more about combining information and experience. That's really what creates knowledge. Because if you don't have, if you just have experience without information, that's probably making you some kind of carpenter or something like that. But in an age of information, you need to have that information in combination with the experience and make your own, so to say, wisdom out of that.
I think that's the basis of the we all know, I'm not going to use the 4-letter word, but in that particular framework is the what I call the DIKWIZ model, the DIKW model. Data first, the information, then comes the knowledge and the wisdom, and all of those steps as you move through from having that content, Sean, as you said earlier too, like, finding it's all there, but you need to walk, go through each of those stages in order to be able to apply that knowledge in the end and make something practical and useful out of it.
But wouldn't it actually be possible to do the other way around? Define what kind of information you would like to have, because you have a wisdom. You know that from like a strategy point of view, now we have a strategy. Now we will need to find out what kind of knowledge can we actually find to support this strategy. What kind of information which kind of data is supporting that strategy. So couldn't you actually work turn them all upside down as well?
Well, I don't think it works one way or the other. It's actually a knowledge spiral as opposed to a knowledge circle. There's no circular steps when it comes to knowledge. This is like this cyclone where it sucks things up and then it dumps things down and then it sucks things back up again and dumps things down. So I don't think there is any starting point as such. Sometimes I think you have a piece of data and then you've got to think, well, what does this mean to me? Where does this fit in my experience or what we're trying to do? So sometimes it's a piece of information that's come to you raw and you need to make sense of how that fits. And then there's the other side of it where you have this strategy or this idea of what you're trying to do and then want to go, well, okay, what do I need to know in order to make this happen?
So we are going to ask.
Sorry, what I like to use there is if I hear people talking about knowledge management, they're usually also always talking about know-how. When you explain what is it, talking about know-how. But I'm thinking if you use know-how, you have skipped 2 steps, because the step before know-how is know what. So there is like, in order to know how you should act upon certain processes or whatever you need to do, and you need to know what processes you need to carry out or what products you need to support, etc. And before that, it's know why. So actually, if you're talking about know how, you first have to answer the questions around know what, and it all starts with the know why. And so we need to stop focusing only on know how. That's what the frameworks are already doing. We need to start focusing on the what and the why.
So who determines that, Dave?
At the business. So if you're talking to the business, and I believe Earl said it, that sometimes the business just doesn't care or doesn't want to answer certain questions. I like to use the 5 whys. If you're just if someone explains to you why something is important, and we just take it for granted and we just carry it out, and we're thinking, well, that's probably the reason. But if you start asking why you really need the information and why he's explained just that, and why, etc., you go on, and then you get to the root cause of the problem, and you really get to understand the business targets and the business goals. And in my experience, I've never encountered one business person who doesn't show any affection when you start asking the why.
Dave, I agree with that. It's an interesting thing. Again, is a lot of times it's the business doesn't know they need to tell us something. They just assume that we know it, and and go forward. But yeah, it's important for us to step out there and start going, hey, explain this to me. What's going on? Why do we do things this way?
Yeah.
So how many of you have seen the recent white paper that was put out in conjunction between Axelos and HDI around the synergies between KCS and ITIL?
Yep.
Yeah. Have not yet. I'll be honest and confess ignorance of knowledge.
Well, there's both the white paper we'll put in the show notes, but there was also a great interview just in the last 24 to 48 hours that Karen Ferris had with John Custy, one of the authors of that paper too, that I really highly recommend people read. One of the key points that came out of that, KCS, or Knowledge-Centered Support, is a methodology that was created by the Consortium for Service Innovation, that HDI then picked up as part of their certification portfolios, if you like, for training in helping people actually manage knowledge on a practical level. I've been around that for quite some years, but it seems now that people were treating IT service management methodologies and frameworks, etc., separate to KCS, whereas there's really a deep synergy. And I think regardless of methodology, whether we're talking the ITILs or the ISOs or the project management frameworks, knowledge is inherent to all of those. And the way we manage the knowledge is inherent to all of those. And that's where I think that this is quite a big thing, that people are just starting to realise that this is the case.
What really surprised me...
Go ahead, Dave.
What really surprised me around the paper was that what they did was link the ITIL processes to KCS. What really surprised me was that, for instance, configuration management wasn't mentioned once. If I think about configuration management and the real value of configuration management, it's about getting information and about your IT landscape and everything around it. So it's striking to me that that it didn't include any reference or relationship or whatsoever.
I think from configuration management perspective, you're talking about configuration management it's about the subject matter. The information is about the subject that you're dealing with. That's the knowledge is around that. So knowledge-centered support doesn't necessarily mention configuration management as such, except for the fact that that's part of pulling the information into the knowledge that surrounds it and using that information.
Well, so Simone, does that tell us that we've got an incredibly narrow scope sometimes on how people think about knowledge? Because again, you look at configuration management, that's just a huge set of knowledge about the assets of our organization.
Is it knowledge or information?
Excellent question.
I'm just throwing it out there. I have particular opinions simply because of some of the cases that we work with in terms of consulting, etc. But again, that shifts and changes depending on what we were saying earlier, how the business actually wants to utilize that in terms of knowledge. But see, to me, it's still information. It's like the kitchen drawer of what we have, what it's doing, how often it's doing it, etc. It's still information. My core around knowledge in terms of using what's inside configuration management is how do I make a decision from this? If I can't make a decision from what I'm reading or what I'm looking at, be it figures, be it text, be it otherwise, then it's just information or data to me. It's not knowledge or wisdom. And
so
that's
the key is action.
How I often view it. Yeah, I've got to be able to, in some way, absorb and understand and make a decision based on what I'm reading or knowing.
I keep coming back to this question of how do we keep it, number one, how do we keep it fresh? And number two, how do we guarantee that this process, I tend to think in processizing things, is it repeatable enough? You know, Daniel was talking earlier about can we flip it to the is this useful to me or what's useful, and David talked about asking why do I need this, and it makes me wonder if we have these kinds of processes, don't we run the risk if we run it so processized that it becomes I don't know, too static to use, or is there where is that line between it's become too static to use
or too instrumental?
I think there is a good. I read a tweet from Matt Barron the other day, and he said that he was in a meeting and he was asked, "Could you actually reference any successful knowledge management tool?" And he said, "Yeah, Google." And
nice.
It's just so simple, but we don't see that as a knowledge management store.
Absolutely, it is.
But I think what we need to realize is that we will need to have a strategy on how we would like to approach this from a culture perspective. As to say, no, I mean we can do the run when we just collect everything, and we do like the wiki way. Anyone can edit anything. We just put in information in there. Or we keep the content high quality with less quality, less quantity. So we know whenever anyone gets a hit, we know that the stuff is to make some kind of personal life experience. This is when I go to the Swedish tax authorities. I don't expect to have anything there that is not high quality.
Well,
there's a third. You were just talking about tax. So sorry, I fell asleep for a second. But that's where KCS is brilliant, because this is why I think this methodology is really you know, it's been the sleeping giant, but really starting to make sense to a lot of people, because you only do the knowledge that's asked for. I mean, how do you know what you need to know? Depends on the
Right.
question. So the knowledge is not like, let's dump it all in there and have what I call dirty data, if you like, you know, this complete messed up knowledge base. You hold on to what it is that's being asked for or what's needed, and you update as it's being asked for. And this is one of the brilliant things that I have to say I really love about the KCF methodology, is this consistency in the ease with which you can update things and collaborate. And that's something we've talked about over the last few episodes as well, is that collaboration ability. So yes, it can be, I guess, in a way, wiki operated. I mean, the tools side of it, look, most tools have some management in play. Again, that depends on the nature of your environment and how you want to apply that. But I think people, before you look at the tool, look at how you value the knowledge, what are you asked for, how often you asked for it, and, you know, look at those hits, as you said. That's the thing. That's why you get Google ratings on the website. It's like, how many hits does your knowledge, are you asked, or people asking for that particular knowledge? That's how it gets to the top end.
Well, and this brings, it's interesting in listening to both you, Simone, and Daniel, the thing that I hear that I go, so we have dump everything in, and then we have dump only the good things in, and then we have improve the search engine and measure who's searching. But then I go, well, what about, though I don't know, again, what, this may not fit in the process, can we improve the people? Like, maybe the people need to start learning how to ask smarter questions and search smarter, more specifically. What steps in our knowledge management project should be geared towards training people out of their habits of hoarding knowledge and make them more smart for searching?
Yeah, so an interesting question.
Back to KCS, because KCS deals with the cultural and team building side as well.
So it's an interesting question that Sean brings up, and I hear you, Simone, but again, it's one of those things. If I create a piece of knowledge and it's valuable and has good use, are the people required to use it when we have some instance where they should? So is that a culture issue that's addressed by KCS, or is that an organizational issue?
It's both. KCS isn't just support, it isn't just IT. I think part of the reason is I've just been sort of training it for too many years and looking at it in terms of, you know, helping on implementations with it, that this is really about, well, look, if the customers ask for this, I mean, I've done the same thing. I ended up having to tweet to HP just to get some support on, you know, registration settings and changing my cartridge issues, and it's still not resolved. But I used their forums, I used their knowledge base, and every time I searched, the only thing it said, sorry, you need to actually talk to a technician to help you do this. And I've just gone, this is driving me insane. So as a customer, I'm sure that there's many out there that have the same feeling when they're talking to IT support, is that, you know, okay, it's good that if you tell me I need to talk to support, but don't send me through these loop-de-loops and hours and days of trying to find the information in order to say you need to call someone.
This is an interesting point, Simone. There was an article, and I always forget the authors in the articles, it wrote in the beginning as the command line, and he was talking about the difference in support from open source, where everybody is almost rewarded for coming up with a quicker solution, versus the Microsoft or pay for model, where we want to avoid calling things problems or incidents or issues, because that implies that there's something wrong with what we've delivered. So it's that mindset shift, and so anything that's in KCS about cultural shift is, it kind of would be an interesting thing to me. Yeah. Because I think that's important, is to change that direction.
A lot of what we look at is definitely, I mean, look, I'm in favour of it because I was doing KM long before IT. In fact, it was really interesting to me, the very first KCS course I sat in on to watch another trainer as I was learning what was in the material. I went, hang on, but I was doing, and then what it did is it just put some pathways together. It put some links together, and a big part of that is that, how do people value knowledge? That's a key question. How do people value knowledge? How do you value it, the business? How do the customers value it?
Is it then where we should start, or is it too abstract to start with? I mean, it's like saying, okay, you need to start shifting your culture. Yeah.
Yeah, let's put the sword point in somewhere else. Yeah, okay.
I mean, because I mean, if I would be a listener to this netcast, where do I actually? I need some help to say, okay, where do I start? Where should I start collecting stuff? Should I start talking to my business peers or my other peers in the other departments, or should I buy a tool, or where do I start?
How many of you have been involved in a knowledge cafe? Have you even heard the term knowledge cafe?
No.
News to me.
Yeah,
News.
not heard it.
Not heard the term. Okay. Knowledge cafes actually began quite some time ago, in fact, back in the 90s. And they're really there to provide open and creative conversations around whatever topic it is, that whether it's the business or IT or both, or look, it can be on anything. It's not even just about business, but it's about trying to collect the knowledge and share the ideas and the insights and get a deeper understanding of the actual subject and the issues involved. Now, I'll put links into the show notes, of course, about knowledge cafes. But Elizabeth Lank developed the concept with World Cafes back in the 1990s. It was popularised then by Charles Savage and then taken further with David Gertine. In fact, I had the pleasure of running a knowledge cafe at an ITSM seminar in Australia with Australia's knowledge bird, April Allen, and had lots of fun in developing the group's understanding of how to use knowledge cafes, how they can use it back in their workforce and stuff like that. So that's something that I would definitely recommend, is looking at what knowledge cafes are about.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
and then starting the conversation from there.
Okay. So, Simone, we have I'm going to call it a U.S. term, I think that may be similar. It's called lunch and learn, or a brown bag session.
Yeah, I love that.
It may not be as formal.
Yeah. Oh, knowledge cafes don't have to be formal either.
That's great. As soon as he said lunch and learn, I went, oh, that.
Yeah.
So as you were explaining, I went, I got it. Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, lunch and learns are great fun. You know, have a potluck. Everyone bring a dish from a different culture that their family's from or something, you know, and really get into it that way.
But I have a final question before we wrap up. I mean, we have earlier that is actually representing a university, and I mean, education and knowledge should be part of your core game. So do you think that would actually be a different viewpoint doing that for higher education compared to a private business?
Well, you know, I don't know if it's a different viewpoint, but it's you have to sit down and go again as you look at the university and what is it? It's got a bunch of, you know, a different set of customers, one called students, one called patients. Those two people obviously have different sets of knowledge they need. You know, student needs to know things about billing, which is an entire set of knowledge. They need to know things about registration, another entire set of knowledge. So this is the fun thing in a university setting, is you have all these, you know, if you look at the university, it's like an umbrella corporation with a bunch of smaller divisions inside of it, all with maybe unique sets of knowledge. And I think this goes back to the point that we were talking about earlier. We don't spend the time talking about the points of integration of that knowledge into the other processes inside the business. So, you know, what is it that the student who's looking up billing information from the registration site may need to know, and how do those things hook together? That's where it gets challenging for us, is to figure out how to cover all these context, because, you know, the other group that we have is obviously faculty and staff, all who have different knowledge needs and want to find out sets of information. So time you get all that together and figure out how do you cover the entire gambit, it takes a while, and it, you know, again, that becomes the big culture issue. How do you get everybody on board? Because believe it or not, those customers have their own specific way they want to use the knowledge, and they want it designed the way they want it designed, not the way I want to design it. So it takes a lot of time to sit down and go through this discussion and to sit down with these different groups and get them to a point of useful, here's the useful pieces that will make a difference in your life.
Can I recommend that do a knowledge cafe and do it around some of the formats that are expressed in KCS, in that knowledge-centered support? Because, I mean, I think the name is a little bit, takes it away, because it's more than just doing it for support. But this whole idea is expressed that you are collating or collecting and then returning the knowledge based on what the customers are asking, but in their language, how they are asking for it. And then once you've got those things, you can build on the stats and say, well, look, we get 20 hits a day from, from the science faculty asking about this particular issue, and they become your top hits or your quick links, and that shifts and changes as those things happen. So there's some really practical aspects that can be really garnered from combining KCS, knowledge cafes, and those sorts of things.
So it's one thing, Simone, you just said, and it just clarified this even more for me, is the difference between a knowledge cafe and a brown bag session. In a brown bag session, I'm usually giving. In a knowledge, I'm collecting.
Yeah.
Knowledge cafe setting. So, so that's a great differentiator. And it's, I think it's an interesting thing too, is we've had a lot of discussion about KCS in my organization and realized that's a maturity step for us that's beyond our reach at this point. So we're trying to do an intermediate thing.
No, it's not. KCS starts little.
Well, it's an interesting thing is compared with all the other projects that we need to work on. That's not going to be the priority, and we're not going to get to be able to devote resources to it. So we're going to have to do something, and it is an intermediate step to get to that point.
Well, I think the Knowledge Cafe is probably the best way to start, but it's interesting that you could then take some of the stuff that's in KCS and use it in the Knowledge Cafe. So Absolutely. You're actually doing it without even calling it that.
Yeah, and a lot of it, again, is it's getting the culture ingrained in our folks to understand this is why we're doing it, and this is how we're going to do it to get to that point to start collecting.
This is how we're going to do it, or this is how do they want to do it?
Yes.
Yeah.
You caught me. I'm guilty. Isn't that actually one of the challenges for everything regarding knowledge, is actually writing your business case? As you say now, how do we prioritize? This is not a prioritized project for our business, but how do you actually make that prioritize? Is it because we are not able to get the figures and facts out?
There's a lot of help out there. So I know KCS has an ROI calculator around doing knowledge management and those sorts of things. Look, I know that I keep, looking at this particular methodology, but quite frankly, after the 20-odd years of trying to manage knowledge in both call centers as well as HR, as well as, the service desks, I just love the simplicity of it, and I love the fact that it collaborates and talks, the conversations happen, and that's where I think the knowledge cafes are so important.
Good, and I would actually like to wrap up today's episode with you, Simone, letting us know the proverb of this week. And it's actually not an ancient, maybe it will become an ancient one, but it's not an ancient one today.
Okay, how many of you are Men in Black fans? Yeah, come on, don't deny it, you love the Men in Black. Okay, who prefers Agent J versus Agent K? Who's the learner? Who's the one that's got to gain the knowledge? I just love it. Okay, so it said 1,500 years ago, everybody knew that the Earth was the center of the universe. 500 years ago, everybody knew that the Earth was flat. And 15 minutes ago, you knew that people were alone on this planet. Imagine what you'll know tomorrow. Agent K from Men in Black.
Love it.
That's great. And well, this ends up the episode 3. We will, of course, be very happy for any feedback, praise, questions that you have for us. Go into the bitpodium.com page, click on the 4th menu on top, and just put in there whatever you want. It's been a great episode. I think we could stay on air for a couple of hours more to just discuss more about this one, but let's wrap up, and thank you very much for joining me today, guys. This was everything from your host, Daniel Billing. Thank you for tonight.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Take care.